right? Or produce a given amount of goods and services out of or using minimum amount of resources. So it has everything to do with what the economy does, right? What is the economy good for? What is the economy? It's that system that transforms resources, right, into goods and services. Very good. Now we know there are good economies. Those are efficient. And there are bad economies that are not so efficient. It is very important to distinguish between efficiency of the economy and health of the economy. Are the two one and the same? Look, our economy is the most efficient economy on earth, okay? But the fact is, even our very efficient economy on occasion gets sick, right? What is the correct name? What is the economics word for economic sickness? What do we call an economy in recession? Exactly. So economies fall into recession, right? Efficient economies fall into recession. Less efficient economies fall into recessions. Recessions simply do happen. So we have to distinguish between efficiency and the health of the economy. Now, the entire course on macroeconomics, the one you've taken before, was the course on the health of the economy, right? This course is going to be on that all-important attribute of efficiency that we haven't really dealt with in macro at all. In other words, we did not explore what makes our economy efficient when we were studying the health of the economy. We were asking questions: why does American economy fall into recession? What can we do about getting it out of recession, right? By the way, do you remember what we can do about the economy in a recession?
Macroeconomic policies.
Macroeconomic policies. In fact, we have two of them, right? What are those two? Fiscal and monetary. There you go. So we learned all that. Good morning. We learned all that, and now we're going to focus on efficiency of the economy. And we know that to find the secret to the efficiency of the economy, we have to adopt a very different approach. It's not enough to just look at the economy as a whole. The secret to efficiency lies deep, deep within the economy. How deep do we have to look? To the fundamental building block of the market economy, which is a market for a single good, right? Market for a single good or service. So we're going to be studying the market. What does it mean to study a market? A market as a place where firms respond to demand by you, the buyers, right? So really, marketplace is a dynamic concept. It's a dynamic system, again, in which you have ever-changing behavior of firms collide against the ever-changing whims and decisions by you, the consumers. And we're gonna try and make sense of that ever-changing, fluid environment. And we're gonna do it, of course, by brutal simplification. We're gonna simplify the analysis so much that you will not recognize publics in the pictures we're going to be using. But the fact is that thanks to this simplification, we will uncover principles, very fundamental rules and laws that guide every single market, including Publix, Walmart, whatever else. Okay? So we will study market really up close. In the process, we will learn what drives your decisions when you're shopping for things, when you're buying things. In the process, we will learn what drives or determines behavior of the firms. How do firms decide to produce what they produce? Why do they decide to produce as much as they do? Why don't they produce more? Why don't they produce less? We will learn all those things. And that will lay a good foundation for our eventual analysis of efficiency of the market. So that's the plan. Today we will take the first step towards building that insight into how markets work. So for now we don't need this picture, and we're going to focus on the market. Now, market is a place where buyers and sellers interact, right? So let's take behavior of buyers and behavior of sellers one step at a time. Let's start with buyers. Buyers demand goods and services, right? Buyers demand goods and services. What does it mean to demand something?
To want or need it?
To want or need it. Do you want or need a new car?
Probably want.
You don't need it.
Well, I mean, new car.
Mm-hmm. Is your current car driving just fine?
It's fine, so I wouldn't get it. Like,
Okay,
I don't
so
need one right now.
you certainly don't need a new car, right? Is there anything you really need?
Food, water.
Well, absolutely,
That kind of
sure.
stuff.
Okay, so what are you
Necessary.
gonna do about it? So what are you gonna do about it? You're gonna go to the store and buy it, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, because you're saying to want something or need something. Look, there's not a lot. Every person on earth
Yeah.
wants food and needs food, right? Yet there are people who die of hunger. What's wrong with them?
There's no supply.
Are
Not
they-
enough supply, not enough
Are they
resources.
are they demanding the food?
Yeah.
They
because-
certainly want it. They certainly need it. Is that the same thing as demanding it?
I guess not.
That's the thing. What do we exactly mean by demand? What's the difference between you demanding food and somebody slowly withering of hunger and not being able to get their hands?
Producing.
You don't produce your own food, I assume.
No.
No. So you don't get into production quite yet. Yes, you were saying?
We're able to buy it and they're not.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Okay, so demand is not just that you are willing to buy something, you're also
Have money.
able to buy, right? Oh, awesome. So, generally speaking, demand has something to do with being willing and able to buy something, right? But again, the sentence I just put together is really amateurish and doesn't sound right, right? Demand is something that we are willing and able to buy. What's something? What's the right noun to put there? What is our demand? What's your demand for milk? Do you drink milk? No, okay. So-
Family does.
Hmm?
My family.
Your family. So what's your family's demand for milk?
At least have 1 gallon.
I can't hear you.
At least have like 1 gallon in there, like
A gallon
at a given time.
per week?
Yeah, probably like that. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. So what is the demand?
Goods.
I'm not sure what you're.
Okay, now what is it I'm asking? Your demand for milk is 1 gallon per week.
Okay. Yeah.
Gallon per week, that is measure of what? One
Quantity.
quantity, right? Is that the quantity of milk you're demanding? So what is demand?
Quantity.
Quantity. Guys, demand is a quantity of a good. Demand is a quantity of a good or service buyers are willing and able to buy. That makes sense?
You said it one more time, please.
Sure. Demand is the quantity of a good or service buyers are willing and able to buy. To buy. Okay? So that's what the demand is. The emphasis, of course, at this moment is the quantity, on the quantity. So you measure demand in quantity of goods or services or a good or a service that buyers are willing and able to buy. And now we're going to ask a question. What does demand depend on? What does that quantity of milk you're buying depend on?
Supply.
So we're going to ask, quantity demanded, what does it depend on? And we're going to write it in the shorthand. The shorthand of writing this is basically mathematics terms as a function. So we will say that quantity demanded depends on, or is a function of, a bunch of things. Don't get spooked by mathematical formulation. I'm not going to test you on it. You're not responsible to express yourself mathematically. It just really makes it easy and quick to write it down.
What's the D after that?
D is a demand function. It's a demand function, right? So quantity of a good or a service you are willing and able to buy is a demand function of several things. In other words, depends on a bunch of things. And so you're saying, your first response is, what does it depend on?
Supply.
Supply.
Of that service.
Supply. So quantity demanded of milk by your family depends first and foremost on the supply of milk. Correct? This is why every single time your family goes shopping for milk, you come to Publix, first thing you go to a milk department manager and you ask them about the supply conditions in the milk market today. Otherwise, you simply don't put your hand on that gallon of milk. Is that what you do every single time?
No. It's dependent on how much money you have.
Say it again.
It's dependent on how much money you have.
Does your decision to buy that gallon of milk or not depend on whether you have money?
We
How much
have
you
that money.
consume.
Or
The consumer's wants and needs.
absolutely all of, yes. So let's take it one by one. First of all, let's start with money. In other words, does how much money you have to spend on the good determine how much of the good you buy? What does typically the amount of money you have to spend on something depend on? How about your income? Is your income a determinant that tells you or drives your decision to buy more or buy less of something?
Yes.
Absolutely. So income. I stands for income. Okay? Is income the only factor that determines your willingness and ability to buy something?
No.
Absolutely not. Price. Very good. Price. Does price determine how much you buy of something? Like, for example, if you make $1 million a year, can you afford a luxury car in America? Are you going to drive a luxury car? Maybe some of you will, but maybe some of you don't, but many of you would, right? Once you're living on $1 million a year, you will probably drive a very fancy luxury car. How about if you live in Singapore on $1 million a year?
No.
You might not actually be driving a luxury car. Why?
Cost of living side.
Because prices in Singapore are incredible when you combine that with insurance and with taxes and everything else. $1 million a year, you will probably feel comfortable driving some kind of economy small car or something. So, the price, most definitely price, is a factor determining quantity of a good or a service, correct? Very good. Can you see this part of the board
Yes.
also well? Excellent, thank you very much. So, the price. And what else, guys? How much you consume of it? Well, that's exactly what we're looking at. How much you consume of it. But what exactly do you mean? Because I think you have something in. Let me put it this way, guys. One day you're gonna make a lot of money. You're gonna be able to afford a lot of things. You're gonna be able to afford a lot of delicacies, like snails, escargot, right? Ooh, awesome. Now you probably don't buy that much of it because it's kind of outside your budget constraint, But once you make big bucks, you're gonna stuff yourself with escargot every single day, aren't you? You are. Baka man. You like all kinds of sleazy, slimy stuff. I love that. But is everybody here gonna truly enjoy it? And no? Why not? You're gonna be able to afford it. Why wouldn't you stuff yourself with escargot?
Because I don't like this.
Because you don't like it. Okay. So, is what you like and what you don't like also gonna determine how much you buy of it? Absolutely. We call that tastes, right? Tastes or preferences. T. So T stands for tastes or preferences. So, we already have three factors that determine how much of something you demand, how much of something you're able, willing, and able to buy. Can you think of anything else that might determine, for example, let me ask you, I see you're drinking Gatorade. Do you always drink Gatorade? Under all circumstances, would anything convince you to buy a different kind of a soft drink? No, you will buy Gatorade no matter what. You're that hardcore?
Gatorade and water, yeah.
Gatorade and water, very good.
If the place like doesn't have it,
Well, that might actually convince you. I see you have a
Oh,
good
yeah.
Starbucks coffee, right? But are you always gonna get Starbucks coffee no matter what?
No.
I mean, obviously, when there's no Starbucks, you're not gonna get it.
Are you trying to say like if there's sales or?
Say it very loud.
Are you trying to say if there's like sales or?
I'm trying to ask you and get you to say it. Absolutely. So, if there is, what might change your mind about getting a Starbucks coffee?
Well, usually companies have like incentives or whatever to try to get you to buy their product.
In other words, if you go across the street, there's this shopping center, there's Starbucks, but next to it there's this whole bean company or whatever it's called, right? And you may like Starbucks, it's an awesome quality product, but if the other company offers you much better price, would you actually consider switching to the other coffee?
Mhm.
There we go. What would happen to your demand for Starbucks when the other company offers a very good deal?
A decrease.
Your demand for Starbucks would decrease. So does the quantity of Starbucks you demand, Starbucks coffee you demand, depend on the price of Starbucks? Sure. Does it depend only on the price of Starbucks? Could it depend on prices of other things? Oh, absolutely. So your quantity demanded for Starbucks coffee depends on the price of Starbucks coffee, but it also depends on prices of other goods. Let's call it price OG of other goods, okay? So prices of other goods. Well, what other goods could actually sway your decision, or price of which goods could actually sway your decision to buy Starbucks coffee?
Well, the
Different
competitors. Yeah.
competing brand of coffee, right? What is it about a competing brand of coffee that would attract your attention? First of all, it's its price, which is pretty good. And taste-wise, does it at least resemble what you enjoy drinking?
And then like availability.
Say it again.
Availability.
Availability, certainly it's right next to it, and it's a right price, and it tastes comparably, right? In other words, would you say that it's actually a good substitute? Is that other coffee good enough substitute? Yeah, it's a good enough substitute. That's why you consider buying it when the price is right. Correct? Very good. So basically, prices of other goods that are substitutes can also sway our decision or determine our decision how much of something we buy. Can you think of prices of some other goods that are not substitutes that might decide whether or not you buy something or how much of something you buy?
Price of crude oil for gas?
Price of crude oil for gas, elaborate.
I don't know.
Now, I mean, you could make a story out of it.
Oh, I could, but, so we're like, I was just spitballing.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, that's, we call it brainstorming in this class, okay? No, that's very good. But you mentioned just one, I mean, price of crude oil for gas. Crude oil is an input to production of gas, right?
Like compliments?
Are you talking about production of gas?
Sure, yeah.
Which is then supply, that's gonna be a different story. Now we're talking about demand.
It's about the price of cows for the price of milk.
Price of cows
Yeah.
for the price of milk. Again, cows.
Purchasing the actual animal increased by 50 cents per head. So they gotta get a little bit more per gallon.
You're absolutely right. Again, supply story.
Should've went with that route first.
No, that's fine, that's fine. You were saying?
Stuff that's patented,
Say it very loud.
patented,
Stuff that's patented.
like medicines,
Medicines, okay? Elaborate.
name brand that comes out with no generic, there's no substitute.
Oh, name brand that comes out, there is no substitute, and you're right. The reason why I'm trying to dig into what it is you're saying is we're gonna talk a lot about that stuff. And I'm trying to see where you're taking the story.
The goodwill maybe of the company.
Goodwill of the company. In other words, are you asking if things like that, like patents or goodwill or brand, if they determine price, is that what you're asking? Certainly, we'll show how. But frankly, that's not even what we're asking right now. Guys, these discussions, these brainstorming sessions, or whatever you want to call it, are often going to be very frustrating for you. Frankly, disappointing. Because you want to talk about interesting stuff like patents and brands and everything. Guys, we're going to talk about it, but it's going to be the end of the session. Why? Because this is introductory class. This is the simple stuff. We first have to go through the kiddie stuff, like the lingo, right? And then eventually we will make our way to serious business, like what you're talking about. Monopolies, market power, that sort of stuff. So I promise we'll get there, guys. But first I have to drag you through this very fundamental stuff. So, here's what I'm asking. Look, we know price of substitutes can determine whether or not you buy something and how much you buy it. One day you're going to be thinking of buying a car. And you're going to be looking at various cars, various sizes of cars. You're going to be looking at trucks. Hey, in America you're supposed to have a truck, right? How are you going to decide whether you're going to buy yourself a sedan or a truck? Of course, what you need it for, do you have a boat to tow or not, right? But ultimately it also comes down to, that's why I was kind of...
Price of gas.
Is price of gas going to determine what kind of a car you're going to buy yourself?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Gosh. That's because gas is a good substitute for a car, right? Because when your car breaks down in the morning, instead of the car, you can hop on a can of gas and take a ride. Correct?
Yeah.
Just like, whole bean company coffee is a good substitute for Starbucks coffee. So gas is a substitute for a car, is it? Oh, wait a second.
It's a component.
Price of gas determines your demand for a car, yet gas is not a substitute. What is gas?
It's a compliment.
Say loud.
It's a compliment.
It's a complement, guys, right? It's something you have to consume or use simultaneously with that. It's a complement. Complementary good. Not compliment, but complement, right? Complementary good that complements the use of the primary good. Good morning. How are you? So, can you come up with some other examples of complementary goods other than cars and gas? Say it very loud.
Hot dogs and
Hot dogs and buns. Any other examples?
Batteries to electronics.
batteries and electronics, and we can go on and on. There you go. Whatever you were
I'm
eating,
waking
it
up.
works. Yes. Awesome. So you see, prices of other goods, such as substitutes and complements, can also affect quantity demanded. How? When the price of a substitute goes up, what happens to your quantity demanded for the primary good? In other words, if the price of the other coffee goes up, are you going to buy more Starbucks or less Starbucks? More Starbucks. If price of a complement goes up, like price of gas goes up, are you going to buy more trucks or fewer trucks? Fewer trucks. There you go. So price of a substitute going up increases quantity demanded. Price of a complement going up decreases quantity demanded. That make sense? No speculation behind this. Is pure intuition. Very good. Now, let's think for a second about income. That should be simple, right? The richer you are, the higher your income, the more you're going to demand, right? And that's universally true, right? The greater your income, the more of something you're going to buy. The more of good or a service you're going to buy. Unless you can think of a counterexample. Can you think of a counterexample? Is there anything you're going to buy less of as you become more and more affluent?
Yeah.
Like what?
I would say first thing that would drop is probably like your purchase of fast foods and whatnot.
Ah.
I'm certainly not eating at McDonald's if I'm driving a Bentley.
Ah, there you go. So you're right that the higher your income, the greater your income, the more Bentleys in your garage, right?
Less cheeseburgers.
But the less
Belly.
cheeseburger, yes, less cheeseburger boxes in your trash. Absolutely. So you see, as our incomes grow, we tend to consume more of many things, but we tend to consume less of other things, such as fast food. On the other hand, some people might say, yeah, but I love those things so much, I'll eat them even more, right? Tastes might have to do something with it. But we as a nation, the wealthier we're going to be, probably our consumption of a certain type of a good is going to come down. Fast food might be one example. Can you think of something else other than fast food that we will consume less of, you will buy less of, you will demand less of as your income increases? So look, you're going to be buying more luxury cars, definitely. Does it mean you're going to be buying more of all cars? No. Which cars are you going to be buying less of?
Domestic.
Small Toyotas, perhaps domestics, you will switch to some fancy imports, right?
Yeah, but it depends on the person.
It depends on the person, most definitely. Well, let me give you an idea. How about used cars? Are you going to buy yourself a lot more used cars once you make serious big bucks? Probably not. Demand for used cars will, or quantity demanded of used cars will decline, correct? Will you take more vacations when you're making big bucks?
Yeah.
Fancier vacations, nicer vacations and everything. Are you going to be camping a lot more?
Maybe if you want.
If you like it, but as a nation as a whole, or
I don't think so.
no, probably more of you will park in 4 or 5-star hotels, right? And fewer of you will be staying, will be backpacking or something. That makes sense? Now, I'm not saying nobody will. Guess where I go tomorrow? We're camping in Key Largo with my wife. I love that stuff. See, I don't do it nearly as often as I used to, but so yeah, I'm sure some people will do it, but overall, quantity demanded for that kind of leisure, for that kind of vacation will decline, right? As the income goes up. So, You see, when income goes up, it doesn't mean that quantity demanded automatically must increase. Quantity demanded for some things, for some goods and services will increase, for others will decrease. How would you characterize the difference? Why is it that when you get richer, you will eat more of some foods, right? Like all cuisine or something. But you will buy less of other foods, like fast food. You will buy more of some cars, like luxury cars, but less of others, like, old beat up clunkers. Income goes up, but what makes a difference between those things that you buy more of and those things you buy less of?
The quality,
Why is it?
the quality.
The quality, absolutely. You're gonna go for better quality and ditch the lower quality, basically, right? So from this point of view, we have to distinguish between the income changes and their impact on quantity demanded. We have to distinguish between two types of goods. Two types of goods and services. The ones we call normal, the goods and services we call normal are the ones that we normally buy more of as we get better off, okay? You earn more money, you demand more of that good. That makes sense? That's normal. What do we call the goods and services we buy less of as we get richer? Not normal? I guess we could. But the people who came up with this terminology started using the word inferior. Inferior, you know what inferior means, like lesser, lower quality or something, right? The advantage of using the word inferior is that it's Latin and it sounds respectable, right? But quite frankly, guys, there is a much easier, simpler way to characterize inferior goods. There's a nice English word. What kind of adjective would you use to characterize inferior goods? Lesser would certainly work. There's something even more gritty than lesser. How about cheap? Would cheap stuff work, right? So as you get richer, you're gonna be buying less cheap foods, right? You will visit fewer cheap restaurants, take fewer cheap vacations, stop driving cheap cars. Is that correct? Not wear cheap clothes. Instead, you're gonna be buying fine stuff, the normal stuff, right? So frankly, how many examples of inferior goods do you think you could come up with?
Countless.
Just as many as normal goods. All you have to do is put the adjective cheap in front of it, right? So there you go. So there's a lot of inferior goods and services, a lot of normal goods and services. How do you distinguish if something is an inferior good, something is a normal good? How can you distinguish it in real world? You're wondering, I wonder if this particular car is a normal good or an inferior good. How can you tell? You can wait until income rises, and then you see if people buy more or buy less. And that'll tell you, right? It's all in a head, in your head, basically. You guys decide what's cheap, what you consider cheap, and what you consider normal. How come? Well, right now you may be driving an old beat-up Toyota, okay, that you can't wait to get rid of and drive some really nice set of wheels. So your old beat-up Toyota feels really cheap to you. Now there's plenty of countries in the world where if you brought that old beat-up Toyota, it would actually be a prized vehicle, right? I don't know, have you ever seen some pictures from the street of Havana, Cuba? What kinds of cars do people drive there?
Geo-looking car.
Really old American cars, trying to keep them running, right? Decades old cars. So if you bring something 10, 12 years old, it would be one of the newest cars on the road, arguably, right? So everything is relative. This is normal versus inferior really depends on how you guys value those goods and services and how you decide to buy more of them or less of them as you earn more money. That makes sense? Very good. Are we done? Well, we're almost done. Before we consider whether there are any other factors driving your decision to buy more or less of some goods, let's focus for a second on price. How do changes in price of the good you're buying, how do the changes in price of the good you're buying determine how much you buy of it?
Whether it's worth it to buy
Let's
something.
suppose price goes up. What does typically happen when price of a good rises? Do you buy more of it or less of it?
Demand drops.
Quantity demanded decreases, right? In other words, you are willing and able to buy less of that good as it becomes more expensive. That makes sense? On the other hand, as price decreases, we tend to buy more of that good as it becomes less expensive. That make sense? It sure does make sense unless you can come up with a counterexample.
Like gas, because you have to buy it.
Gas, because you have to buy gas, right? So,
I mean, in the same respect,
Okay.
you're gonna have people like price of gas rises over people you carpool, you take less road trips. You're not driving unless it's a necessity. So I mean, you do deal with it and you purchase less of it. And when the price of gas does drop, you see people purchasing more road trips, leisure driving. So I mean,
absolutely. In other words, is it true that here in America we consider gas a necessity?
yeah.
Sure, that's how you get to work, that's how you get to school. Yes, you have a comment?
Well, can't you say the same thing about if you're making big bucks and, you know, the price goes up, they'll buy more,
Yes.
you know?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Your colleague here raised the question, isn't that kind of comparable or similar to changes in income?
like normal people like
Mhm.
us, if price goes down, we'll buy more. But
Yes.
if you have a bunch of disposable income, when price goes up, there's less supply of it, so they'll buy more.
In other words, even if price goes up, the impact of the rising price can be overwhelmed by a rapidly rising income.
Like if they only make 5 Bentleys a year and
Mhm.
you know they're whatever $1 million a piece, you know,
Gotcha.
you're gonna pay the higher price because it's supply is so limited.
In other words, your colleague argues somewhere along the lines. Look, 50 years ago, gas price was a fraction of what it's today. So over the last several decades, gas prices went up wildly. Yet, are we buying today more gas than 40, 50 years ago or less gas? Absolutely, we're buying more gas. So you see, it's more expensive, yet we buy more of it. But
There's so many more consumers today.
exactly. In other words, you can explain that by simply showing that there's more of us on the road, right? Number one. Number two, our incomes have also increased. In other words, yes, when you see price rising and people buy more of something, you can definitely explain it by other factors changing, correct? Which is exactly why it's so important. If you want to really analyze the effect of these individual factors, you have to isolate their effect. How do you isolate the effect of the change in price? By assuming that everything else remains the same, remains constant, right? So let's assume for a second there is no change in number of buyers. Let's suppose there is no change in income. It is really only price that rises. When price of gasoline goes up, nothing else changes. Are we going to buy more gas? Your colleague here made a very strong point, an interesting point, saying that, well, when it comes to gas, it's a necessity. Even if the price goes up, you may buy just as much as you did before, right? Because you still have the same schedule, you have to get to school, you have to get to work.
And even if you carpool, like, those people are still buying the gas. Like, someone has to buy it.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Which is why it's also important that we distinguish between an individual demand for gas, because your individual demand for gas may remain the same. Because if you decide to drive your car or you have nobody to carpool with, you will just have to make the trip and you will have to buy that gas no matter how much it costs, right? So distinguish between your individual demand for gas and the market demand for gas. It means demand by all the buyers, not just you. You may be very inflexible in your purchasing habits of gasoline. We say that your demand for gasoline is totally inelastic. That's the economics concept that we will introduce. You just buy no matter what it costs. Does it mean that all of us are like that? No. Some of us will start carpooling. Some of you guys may actually start riding a bus. Some of you may start riding a bike. And some of you may buy a new, more efficient car. Does that happen? Oh, absolutely. Over the last several years, a lot of American families opted to buy a smaller car, right? When you look at the parking lot today, and you compare it to what that parking lot looked like 5 years ago, it's incredible. I mean, 5 years ago it was full of trucks. Now it's mostly sedans and smaller cars. So you see that consumers do adapt. Not all. But your point is well taken. Not every demand is equally responsive to change in price. Your point was that when it comes to gasoline, we have to buy no matter what. And you were almost right. You were close to the point, right? The truth is, we do demand gasoline quite inelastically. But let me challenge you while we're on that topic. Can you really think of demand for some good or some service that you truly, really, really get demand no matter what the price? And you get exactly, let's say, 1 unit, no matter what the price. And what is even more peculiar, even when the price goes down, you're not going to get 2 or 3. You're still just going to get 1. That's possible unless, of course, houses are so cheap that you can buy a house for $5,000 in North Jacksonville, which was 4 years ago. You could still buy houses like that, right? And a lot of people snatched, 4 or 5 of those. Yes, you were
Was the price of the other different kinds that good, or
say that?
other different kinds that one good, or no?
It's like insurance. Is that what you're getting at? Like, for instance, like maybe like healthcare or car insurance. You're still going to buy.
Stick with
one policy.
healthcare for a second.
Okay.
What about healthcare? What goods or services? You're talking about insurance, right?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, you mean it well, but the fact is, there are millions of American families that do not have health insurance.
Okay.
Would they have it if it was cheaper? Probably yes, right? So there is some flexibility. But still, let's talk about healthcare, guys. If your tooth hurts really, really bad, you go to the dentist hoping it's just some kind of cavity or something. And your dentist tells you, oh no, this is beyond cavity.
It's cancerous.
This is, well, I hope not, but this is root canal, okay? You hear root canal, how does it make you feel? Right, you cringe. But the doctor tells you, but you know what? It's your lucky day. And lucky, gee, how's that my lucky day? And he tells you, oh, we just decreased prices of our root canal operations for this month by 50%. They're all special. What's your response? Oh, that's awesome. Do 3 of them at the same time. All right. On the other hand, if the doctor tells you, okay, do you have insurance? You say, no, I don't have insurance, so I'm going to pay for it out of pocket. And they tell you, yeah, but the price has just gone up from $1,100 to $1,500. What are you going to tell them? Oh, no, I'm just going to tough it out.
Pull it out yourself.
No, you're going to pull it yourself. You're going to get it, right? So you see, there are some goods that we demand, and our quantity demanded depends very little, if at all, on price. And of course, you can take it to an extreme, right? Like a heart transplant, when your life depends on it. Because you might say, yeah, your life doesn't depend on that, root canal operation. Maybe pulling the tooth is cheaper. But when you need a heart transplant, what's a cheaper option? There is none. There you go. So no matter what the price, you will go for the heart transplant. And once those heart transplants, become cheaper and cheaper, it doesn't mean you're going to get 3 hearts, right? So you raised a very important point that we will elaborate on within about a couple weeks, when we're going to be talking about how responsive quantity demanded is to the changes in price. But let's now get back to the original question. Does quantity demanded generally depend on the price of the good? Sure. How does it depend? When the good becomes more expensive, we buy more of it or less of it?
Yes.
Less of it, right? We buy less of it. On the other hand, when the good becomes cheaper, we tend to buy more of it, assuming other things remain constant, right? Just for your information, there is a terminology that goes with that assumption that all other things remain constant. It's ceteris paribus. Have you ever heard that, ceteris paribus? Simply means assuming other things remain constant, okay? Just for your information, when you take a look at the book, you're going to see references to ceteris paribus. That's what it means. So, we determined that quantity demanded depends on the price of the good in a predictable way. As the price rises, we buy less of the good. As the price falls, we buy more of the good. This is in stark contrast to the impact of prices of other goods, where price of the other good going up may cause quantity demanded to either go up or go down, depending on whether that other good is substituted or complement. Rise in income may result in you buying either more of the good or less of the good, depending on whether the good is normal or inferior, right? But when it comes to price, guys, when price goes up, you tend to buy less. As the price goes down, you tend to buy more. It's a predictable relationship, okay? Now my question is it really ironclad relationship? Not in the sense of elasticity, as your colleague there pointed out, but generally speaking, guys, can you come up with an example, with a counterexample, any counterexample, where really price going up makes you actually buy more of something? Other things constant.
Food.
Price of food goes up, so you buy more food?
No.
Probably not quite. Anyone?
What about scarcity of what's ever being sold? Like however many is like left of that, whatever you're buying.
In other words, you see the price go up, you snatch the last few things just so, right?
Gold.
Gold. Elaborate. Who said that? Good. Elaborate. What do you mean gold?
Gold, when the price is raising, people they buy it to save it and sell it.
Oh, in other words, a speculator. People call themselves investors, but basically they're speculators, right? If you're a speculator in a gold market, when you see price of gold going up, what do? You buy gold. Right now, gold prices are still in 1,000 plus range, somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000, right? They vary wildly. Do you know what what do we mean by price of gold? Price of gold per ounce, per troy ounce, right? Do you have any idea what the price of gold in the world markets was in the late 1990s,
Drastically
about
lower.
15 years ago.
Drastically lower.
About how? Do you have a rough idea? Wild
Probably
guess?
half.
65.
It was something like $260 per troy ounce, guys.
For how much?
For troy ounce. Troy ounce is what, 30 grams, something like that. Okay, so it used to be $260. Right now, did you check the gold?
13,
How much?
1300.
1,500.
13.
1,300, very good. 1,300. So, you see that price changes. Now, it's interesting because now that the price is very high, or was climbing throughout the 2000s, we saw the price of gold climbing, right? And we saw a lot of speculators buying larger and larger quantities of gold as the price was going up, right? Is that what we said? When price goes up, people demand less? They did exactly the opposite. Price was going up and people were buying more, right?
Because later on the price is probably still gonna go up and then we'll be able to sell.
Oh, elaborate. Why do people buy more highly priced gold than they were buying lower priced gold?
To invest.
Yeah, but elaborate that idea just aloud so I get it on the camera.
So that they can invest and whenever the price goes back up, they'll sell it for a lot more than they bought it for.
In other words, a lot of people are buying more gold at $1,300 per troy ounce than they were buying at $260 per troy ounce. How come people buy more at such a high price? It's not because the price is high now, but because they expect that price to go even higher, right?